Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans of notions discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery and crack. Today we have a wonderful episode with our guest Flan Garvey, teacher, politician and all-round Clare man, about the topic of peace.
I was always treated well by the soldiers at checkpoints and so on. Now, I must say that I kind of resented being stopped and checked and so on.
Of course.
But I have to say as well, I was never treated but like a gentleman. You know, I don't care how often I was stopped. I didn't mind being stopped by them. When I got used to it, they were doing a job, they had a job to do, and you know, it was their life. And I began to understand, you know, you can understand the enemy if you give them a chance to talk to you, and if they listen to you, and if you listen to them, maybe more important. And that's what happened there.
Well, you were saying how much Ina has changed, Flan. You were saying there was five houses.
5 houses in Ina in 1973, the 1st of July when I went down there teaching.
That is wild.
Yeah,
So where were the students coming from?
that time.
Yeah, were they all from the
They
town
were all
of around?
local.
Or?
Oh, they were all local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just Ina itself was just very small. Yeah.
Well, it was a perfect village. Everything was there except people.
And they've sorted that now. Yeah.
We got that. We bought a farm there, and that changed things.
Yeah, Flan was saying where the shop is and the school and all
The
that.
houses.
A group got together and purchased that land to
Yeah.
develop Ina, a
22
group of locals.
22 and a half acres.
And I was saying how inspiring that is, because it is groups of motivated local people
Yeah.
working together rather than relying on big institutions. And of
Yes.
course, there's a role for institutions to help people as well. But
Yeah.
I just thought that was
Yeah.
very, very inspiring.
Well, Una gave a lovely speech at the. There was a celebration for the kindergarten in Kilfenora, and she gave a lovely speech about setting up all the Steiner initiatives
Yeah.
locally, and
Yeah.
it's amazing, like how much, just local work people have put in, and it's working, and it's so popular.
And if you can do it, you don't want 1,000 people at all.
Mm.
Few people who are really going for it, that's what you want.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Well, Flan, I must apologise. I do a sneaky thing sometimes where I just start recording.
Okay.
So if you don't mind me being rude, I'm going to say we're in the episode, Flan, and we're going to start in media res, and I'm going to welcome you and thank you very much for having a chat with myself and Bart, and we will welcome Flan Garvey, who I'm not sure how you'd like to describe yourself, Flan. You have so many hats, but you're a teacher, a politician, local mayor. You worked for the council. You worked for the Clare Champion. Am I missing anything, Flan? I'm sure I am.
Manager of teams, hurling teams, camogie teams.
There we go.
As a matter of fact, the only club in Clare, camogie club in Clare, that won in All Ireland was in 2011 when I was managing the Ina girls.
Is that right?
Yeah, and we're still the only club.
Is that
To have
right?
won-
That's
to have won
amazing.
in All Ireland. But we did it in November 2011.
Unreal. Well, we're delighted you're going to come and chat to us, Flan. When I called into you a couple of weeks back and I asked if you'd come on, you had, I was kind of explaining the podcast and how we work and how we take a topic every week to chat. And I was like, is there anything you'd like to talk about? And straight away you had this amazing idea, which I think is, I'm really excited to talk. I would be excited to talk about this anytime, Flan, but I'm particularly excited to talk about it now. So we're going to call the episode Peace, but specifically what you were talking about was your role in Northern Ireland during the time of the peace process and the kind of work you did there, Flan. And I suppose what drew your attention to that? What motivated you to start reaching out and trying to build bridges between the north and south?
Well, first of all, I must say I have cousins. I had first cousins in Antrim. I still have cousins there. One of them is still alive, first cousin. I have a number of second cousins and so on. And one of them actually will be down here in Estime in a few weeks' time.
Very
There's
good.
an annual event we arrange, and a busload comes down
Right.
to the Falls Hotel. And we have a great week from Monday to Friday, 25th to 29th November. But what started me off really was I was elected to Clare County Council in 1985. And that was the middle of the Troubles. And, you know, when 1988 came, I, as a Fianna Fáil man, and we claimed we were the Republican Party, and these terrible things went on. And every evening, 6 o'clock news, there was someone shot, there was someone murdered, there was a bomb, there were people killed, there was places blown up. It was terrible. And I said to myself, we are the great Fianna Fáil Party. What are we doing about this? Or what's anybody doing about this down here? And I'm ashamed to say, but it was a fact, the people down here really didn't give a damn what was happening in Northern Ireland as long as it didn't affect them. That's a terrible thing to have to admit, but it was true. And in 1988, I'm watching all this over the years, and I'm now a member of Clare County Council, and I said, do you know, I said, we should reach out the hand. Someone might shake it. So I proposed in the Clare County Council chamber one day that Clare County Council would twin with a Northern Council. I didn't mention any specific council, just a Northern Council. My colleagues in the Fianna Fáil Party and other parties may say, they tore strips out of me.
It wasn't a popular idea, no.
No, it was not. One of my own party colleagues, he accused me of losing my faith, losing my republicanism, losing everything. And you know, he spoke first, and he kind of said, and people in politics will say, if they think something is popular, they'll follow it. And holy God, nearly everyone that spoke followed that train of thought. That I was wasting my time, I was, you know, losing my religion, I was losing everything and giving up my principles. But you are given an opportunity when you have a motion proposed. At the end, when everybody's finished, you get a chance to reply. And I said roughly the following. I said, I thank you all for your contributions. Most of them obviously are not my thinking. And I said, but I want to tell you, I said, where republicanism began. I said, Wolfe Tone was another one, I said. He was a Protestant. So let's talk about where it all began, where the republicanism came from. And I said, people like him, he was known as the father of Irish republicanism. And he wanted Ireland united under one name, not Protestant, not Catholic, not dissenter, but Irishman, United Irishman. That was it, irrespective of creed or anything. And I said, all I'm doing really is I'm offering the hand of friendship. And I said, if somebody in Northern Ireland in a council is willing to shake that hand, I said, I regard that as a great achievement. And I said, all I'm doing is giving him the opportunity to do it. Now, my colleague had said earlier on, all I was doing was giving the opportunity to rebuff or refuse my friendship move.
Well, that's always the risk.
I was going to say,
Flan?
that's always the risk.
That's always the risk. That's always the risk. So time went on, and we were lucky that in the end it was agreed they would send a letter from the council to Cooperation North. They were a North-South body at the time, but they were known as Cooperation North, now known as Cooperation Ireland. And we were looking in this way that the acting chief executive at the time was a man from Newry called Tommy Fagan, who I'm very friendly with ever since. Ran marathons with him in New York for the peace movement and all that. Actually, yesterday I was down the school Nina, where a past pupil of mine was 30 years teaching in the school. She was a pupil of mine as well as a colleague of mine later on. And I came back for my second and last marathon in 13th of November 1994, to welcome her to the school as a colleague. But all that happened, it worked out that Tommy himself said, well, you know, I'm from Newry and Mornes, they were at the time. Let's give them a chance, see, will they accept it? And thanks be to God, they did. And in 88, a busload of us, councillors and officials, went up to Newry, and we were welcomed there. And one of them, a unionist I met a few years ago in a hotel in Newry, and he says, well, Flan, do you remember the first night you came to Newry to the council? I do well, I said. Well, I said to myself, do you know, when you got up to speak, I said to my colleague beside me, another Unionist, what the fuck is he up to? Well, did I laugh at that? Because I could well understand, a Unionist Protestant. What else would I think? But I'm plotting something.
Yeah, they'd be suspicious, of course.
But it went on from there, and the following St. Patrick's Day, Charlie Smith was the mayor of Newry and Mourne, and he invited me to come to the St. Patrick's Day parade and join him in the car going around the parade in Newry, which I was delighted to do. But I knew there'd be a follow-up to it. A good friend of mine in later years, Henry Riley, was a Protestant, and he was a Unionist councillor there too. And I met him after it. He says, "Oh, Flan, I heard you were up for the St. Patrick's Day parade. But would you come for the 12th?
Ooh. So just for any international people that might be listening, Flan, because I think the whole world is probably familiar with St. Patrick's Day. But on the island of Ireland, St. Patrick's Day obviously would be more associated with the South, the Catholic tradition,
Yes.
and then the Unionist side would have their celebration would be the 12th, which is a big deal.
Absolutely.
Up north. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I said, Henry, is that an invitation? Oh, 'tis, he said. Henry, I'll be in Kilkeel. That's where he was from. A real big area of Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'll be there, Henry. So Mairead, my wife, and myself went up the evening before. We become good friends with a lovely Presbyterian couple there. Irene died some years ago now. God rest her, a lovely woman. And her husband, Robert, who used march on the 12th in Kilkeel. There was a councillor who was elected as a Protestant. And obviously, he wouldn't have great regard for me or whoever it was, for that reason maybe. But on the 12th, on the 11th of July, we were up there, and we went out to Henry's house, and we went out to an official's house, Robert McKnight. And when we came out of Henry's house, he bent down to his car and started looking. I said,
Oh my God.
"What are you looking for, Henry?"
Yeah.
"Bomb," he says. I said, "Are you serious, Henry?" "I'm really serious," he says. "It could happen." Anyway, we went out to Robert's house, and his mother had lovely cake, old-fashioned bakery cake, and we loved it, sure, and it was grand, and we had a chat. And we went into Kilkeel there, where they had a big bonfire and built in the daylights out of the lambeg drums and all that. And I was taking all this in, and coming home, Henry said to me, "Flan, I have a request for you." I said, "What is it, Henry?" "Don't march tomorrow," he said.
Ooh.
I said, "Why, Henry?" "You may not realise it, but you'll put my life and your life in danger." I said, "Okay, Henry, but I came up to march in it. Can I go to it?" "Oh, you can," he said, "of course." So we went in, and we watched the different order lodges marching by, including our friend Robert Adair in lovely uniform and the pipes and all that. And didn't I see my friend, the man elected Protestant? And I picked my time, and I dashed out into the parade and shook his hand. He only had one hand, he had an accident. And I said, "Good luck, well done." And we became great friends after that. But I found that, and it is so true now as well, you think of what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon and all those places. Why can't people who are bitter enemies, why can't they say, "Look it, we only have one life. Can we not sit down and talk?" And I did that, and it became a great event. I actually, in my public life, that was the best thing I ever did. Because by making friends up there, and I made great friends, and I made great friends in every party, especially the Unionist Party, the DUPs, the UUPs, you name them, and a number of them will be down for that event in Simon now on the 25th of November for a week. And Clare County Council will provide a bus from Belfast to the Falls Hotel to bring them down, in memory of the work I have done, which is great. But from there on, we had a tourist council in Clare Tourist Council, and I was a member of it. And I must say that of all the groups in Clare, they gave me 100% backing the whole time. And I noticed that there were different conferences councils used to go to. But there was no such thing as a national tourism conference.
Yeah.
And I said, that's the link. Everybody will make a few bob or a few pounds out of tourism.
Yeah.
And I said, the unionists are hard-nosed businessmen.
Yeah.
And I said, we'll run a tourism conference. And we ran the first one in Ennis. And a very small number turned up. But we didn't say no. And one night at a meeting, I said, I think we should aim to have every council in Northern Ireland represented here in Clare at our National Tourism Conference within 10 years. And we did it in 9. We got every council in Northern Ireland, and there were 26 of them there, and every one of them was represented in Clare within 9 years. No matter who controlled the North Council, whether it was Protestants or Catholic or Republicans or Nationalists, it was all the same. They all came. And it was the greatest event. People came down, and you would always know, I remember the first Saturday night in the West County Inn, where we used to have it first, and then the Fawns Hotel in Simon later on for years. But at 12 o'clock on a Saturday night in the hall in the West County, you'd know exactly who was Protestant and who was Catholic. Because like Cinderella, at the sound of 12 o'clock, they were all gone to bed. They were all gone to bed to respect the Sabbath. As I said, years afterwards, 25 years after in Steinman, at 4 o'clock in the morning in Steinman, we singing our heads off, you wouldn't know who was Catholic or Protestant.
But listen, Flan, I think this is like this. I find this a really moving story because you're like saying all these higher order principles of party affiliation and tribalism. I really like this person. I made friends with this unionist. But were you not terrified when you were going? Because you were already going to a year on Paddy's Day and then the 12th. But were you not that first time getting up to speech? Were you not afraid?
No, I was never afraid. Never. Because I knew that if you're speaking peace, most people will respect you. Some won't, like Pope Gandhi in India long ago, great man of peace. But it was worth it. I thought, you have to pay a price in this. And I remember one evening, leaving school in Ina at 3 o'clock and driving to Newry and being back home for 9 o'clock in the morning for school again in Ina. But there was a price to be paid, and I knew, maybe my family weren't that happy with me at the time that I was overdoing it. I was away too long or too often, whatever it was. But, thank God I pushed it through.
Yeah.
And I made great friends, as I said, from the opposition author. And there's a man coming to this time, and I was a former MP in London, Roy Beggs, very hardline unionist man, official unionist party. We're great friends now. As a matter of fact, he paid me a great tribute, which is sad in a way. A couple of years ago, he says, Flan, you're the only Republican I trust.
That is very sad.
That's sad.
Because you would hope that after you had reached out the hand, you would hope that would kind of spread more for him, I suppose.
But apart from that, it just shows the way the communities up there were divided. They were so embittered by tradition, and neither side would, as the unionists would say, give an inch, not an inch. And that was what had to be broken.
And I think it's maybe a bit hard for us to maybe some of the people listening, Flan, were born after the Good Friday Agreement, you know, but like I'm old enough to remember bombs going off every week, every second week, shootings, and again checking under the car for improvised explosives. We were watching an episode of Father Ted last night, and there's a joke about how a bunch of priests get caught crossing the border and they have a bunch of machine guns in the back, right? So the RUC, take them in. And you're like, it's a funny joke, but it was true, It was
true.
And I think nowadays people talk a lot about how, and there are many examples of this around the world, Brexit and the US and Gaza and Israel, and that how divided people are. But we were intensely divided. We were violently divided, and very much defined, each side defining itself by what they weren't. We're not the other guys. And I find it incredible that you were able to walk into the middle of that and reach out the hand.
And it feels like it was quite natural. The way you speak about it, I'm not minimizing the effort, but I mean, it feels like you were like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. Look, as I said, I had cousins up there. And one of them, Mary Neeson, as she's now, Mary Macaulay, an aunt of mine left East Clare in 1913. She was a teacher. That time we were under British rule. And she couldn't get a job locally. So she went up to the north and she got a job teaching in Portland National School. She came back twice to Clare in her life. I never met the woman, never knew her. I knew of her as Auntie Minnie. My father only went up to visit her once in all my years, and all his years as well too. She came home twice since she went up there. She came home for her mother's funeral and she came home on her honeymoon. But that just shows the way we were divided. People didn't travel that time, and in the case of Northern Ireland, people were afraid to travel, to cross that border. But I saw it as the only way to shake hands with people, get talking to them, and get to understand them. And now I understand. I was terrible. I have a story to tell you. I was terrible. Came from a Republican background. And in those troubles, honest to God, when I heard of 3 soldiers shot or bombed in Northern Ireland, I was delighted. I was happy.
Part of the struggle, yeah.
Part of the struggle. But you know, thanks be to God, I lived to get the chance to make up for that. That was terrible. To think of any mother's son, and they were young people, those English soldiers, think of any mother's son being killed by our crowd, as I was calling.
Yeah.
Oh God, tonight when I look back, I said to myself, well, Flan, you did one thing right in your life.
Yeah.
And that was to offer the hand of friendship there.
But isn't it great to be able to change, Flan? To be able to say, I was like this and no longer, you know.
Yes. But by talking to people, as I said earlier on, they know you have no hidden motive. They get to know you. You get to know them too. And that is why the Rybegs I mentioned, when our conferences finished about 10 years ago, he came to me one time and he was down and he said, Flan, any chance you'll organise a get-together in the Falls Hotel in Simon again? No conference, just people come and have a chat and have a few drinks and dance or sing or whatever it is. So that busload will be coming to Simon on Monday week, next 25th of November, for a week,
Amazing.
Monday to Friday, and we'll have a great time. We'll have a great time. It just shows what it meant to people like him.
So how many of these episodes have we done now? We've done...
This is maybe our 20
or something. This is the first time I've gotten teary-eyed. When you said that there, Flan, when you said, I was horrible, thanks be to God I got the chance and the time to learn. I think that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, especially in the world now where people are, I'm this side, you're at that side. Oh, if you voted this way, I will not talk to you. Like, it upsets me deeply. And then when you say that, I find that so humble and beautiful to go from someone who was cheering on the deaths of the enemy, in inverted commas, to someone who's actually like, no, I'm going to reach out the hand of friendship and I'm going to work towards peace. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Fair play to you.
And, I was always treated well by the soldiers at checkpoints and so on. Now, I must say that I kind of resented being stopped and checked and so on.
Of course.
But I have to say as well, I was never treated but like a gentleman. You know, I don't care how often I was stopped. I didn't mind being stopped by them. When I got used to it, they were doing a job, they had a job to do, and you know, it was their life. And I began to understand, you know, you can understand the enemy if you give them a chance to talk to you, or if they listen to you. And if you listen to them, maybe more important. And that's what happened there.
Yeah.
And it became known. And as a result of all that, in 1999, I represented my country once abroad. Because of this episode of Northern Ireland, I was invited to Bilbao in Spain to an international gathering of councils from all over the world to give a talk about what had happened, what I had done for Northern Ireland or with Northern Ireland. And I have a lovely story which I'll tell now. And this had repercussions afterwards, and good ones. I used to stay with these lovely Presbyterian people in Northern Ireland, Irene and Robert Adair. And he was a great farmer. He used to keep a few pigs, and he sowed a lot of potatoes. And he used to always give me spuds, as I called them, to bring home when I was coming home. And one weekend, I brought home a bag of spuds, and the thought struck me. Do you know, next Friday, I'll bring spuds to my classroom. And I'll give every child in my classroom a spud. And I did that and said to them as follows, I know you're trying to ask me questions now, I said, but I'll answer all the questions on Monday morning when you come back in. What I want you to do is take that spud home. If you can, slip it into the pot without Mammy seeing you do it. And tell me then next Monday what happened. So they all came back on Monday. Well, what was the story? Oh, they were lovely. It was lovely spud, lovely flowery potatoes and so on and so on. And of course the question came then, why did you give them to us? I'll tell you why, I said. They came from a lovely Presbyterian family in Northern Ireland. They came from the ground in Northern Ireland. The ground in Ireland, I said, never fought, north or south. The people did. I said, you have proved a point that, you know, good spuds will come from the ground, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, it's all the same. And I told that story in Bilbao.
And was the trip to Bilbao, was that related to the Basque kind of issues? Or
No, it just happened, just picked out that time as the vineyard.
Okay.
They have different vineyards every year.
Right.
So that was the one for me. And it was great. And a man came up to me afterwards, he was an Italian, and he said to me, I have a friend down here with me, he said, an Italian mayor in Italy, he'd like to talk to you. So we spoke, I went, of course I'll talk to him, I said. And he was very interested in the story about the spuds and the thing about the peace and so on. And he was the mayor of a place in northern Italy called Pozzoleone. It's an hour and a quarter roughly from Vienna. Sorry, from
Venice?
Venice, sorry. Vienna, Austria, sleep.
That's not that far away either.
Begins with a V. And in time, Simon and Pozzoleone twinned with each other, as did a place in Greece, Schimatari, as a result of the other twinning as well. But you know, great things can happen from a simple thing. They can.
I love sorry, I have so many things I want to say, Flan. I'm getting a bit flustered, but you know, one thing I love is the way you talk about there needs to be a cost when you reach out.
Yeah.
It's not everyone's going to go, oh, how, you know, not everyone's going to be applauding you. You had resistance from your own party, from other political parties, from the unionists you were interacting with and stuff. You had to kind of prove your worth, you know. And I do wonder if, and again, to talk about what we were talking about at the start, sometimes a small groups of people can be more effective, Flan, because they're not bogged down by too much policy or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the way you're bonding over, like in the march, or that's a celebration, a festival with the spuds, you know, that's through food, you know. I think people often get defined by religion or politics or something like that, but there's a lot more things that connect us outside of those, Flan, aren't there?
Absolutely. And you know, at present, it's good to have been educated, or to allow yourself to be educated and listen to people who differ. For example, at present, I am a member of Fianna Fáil, and always will be. But as you may know, my daughter Roisin is going for the next general election in a few weeks' time, and she's the Green Party. And some people would say to me, well, a woman said to me the last election, she says, you're changing your colour, she said to me. And I said, Bridie, I said, I'm not changing my colours, I'll always be Fianna Fáil. But I said, if your daughter was different from you, would you not back her? Oh, that's a different story. She said, no, it's not different. I said, it's my story right now. I said, family first, other things afterwards. But you can change, and if I don't feel anything wrong with not being a member of Fianna Fáil and breaking my neck to have Roisin elected if possible. I'd love if she was.
Yeah.
But you know, that's life, and you make use of what comes, and you must change or adapt to what the flow is. You keep your principles, but you must move on. You must move on.
And I also think like very specific policies can be less important to people than knowing that a good person is being elected, or someone who has principles, because the main principles are often quite similar with reasonable people, and then they make the biggest issue of a smaller issue, and you're like, but that's not really what it's about. Like in your story there about the North, you were like, the human connection is much more important to me, because obviously they had very different outlooks on a lot of things, but that didn't stop you.
Yeah, no, it didn't, no. And in those years too of the famous border, do you know what I loved doing? And before I went up to visit my cousins, we used to go to, there was a great market in Jonesborough on a Sunday, just over the border. And you'd go up there, I used to do it, bought a television, bought butter, boxes of butter, tyres for the car, all things, you fill up the car and so on and so on. I love smuggling.
There's too many good sound bites here.
Now, it wasn't that I was smuggling huge amounts of anything, but I don't get the same kick crossing the border at all now.
No, it's not. I understand. It's not the same. There's something kind of romantic to that. I was talking to a captain who will remain nameless, but who's been a captain on the river ships in Europe for a very long time. And oh my God, the amount of smuggling they used to do. And it just feels very romantic when you talk about it. You're kind of like, it doesn't seem to be any harm in it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not on the official Flan Garvey party manifesto now.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But another thing I love about how you approach this plan is that it is a bit funny. Like it's a slightly mad situation as well to be walking into quote unquote the enemy's den and stuff like that. And like I do think a bit of humor does a lot to diffuse this kind of stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I remember the first year that those two lads I mentioned earlier on about the 12th of July, they came down to the tourism conference the following year. And they came out to Ina, to the pub in Ina with me on the Sunday. So they never were in a pub on a Sunday in their lives until then, you know. We had a few drinks. Yeah. I love sing-songs as well too, and it's a great bond. It's a great bond. A good sing-song is worth a lot. And if you're able to sing, you'll sing. Whether you're Catholic or Protestant, it's all the same.
Yeah.
You know, you might sing different songs, but that's beside the point.
That's it.
100%. Well, this is something I've seen a lot, like especially singing in Doolin, for instance, that there be loads of Americans coming to Doolin, and there are usually great crowds who are really appreciative. Yeah. But there be, especially during the COVID, people really had a big chip on their shoulder on both sides, where they're both very angry at the other side of the political aisle. Yeah. And I was just kind of, every time they would bring that stuff up to me, I'm like, that's not what we're doing here. Yeah. We're just singing. Yeah. But it also, I would nearly want to show them those conversations I had with, like, show the Republicans the chats I had with the Democrats and vice versa, because I was like, you guys are saying the exact same thing to me. Yeah. You're basically saying, aren't they all mad? And it's like, well, if you're both saying that, maybe you need to try and understand each other a bit more. And also, I love to be that space holder where you're like, that's not what we're doing here. Yeah. We're just singing. Yeah. And everyone loves singing. They do.
And actually, those places where you can get together and it's not a political place or a religious place, it's food or singing. Yeah. I remember there's a very famous story about a Rory Gallagher gig in Belfast. So Rory, the great blues guitarist, is often associated with Cork, but he was born in Donegal. Yeah. And he played a gig in Belfast in the 70s, mid to late 70s, and the RUC were begging him to cancel it because there was like a bombing the night before and a retaliatory attack and stuff, and he was like, the tensions are really high, and he's like, nah, I'm going ahead with the gig. And he was a huge gig, half Protestant, half Catholic, and not a hint of trouble. Yeah, I'd say there you are. Half the RUC was around that venue and nothing happened, you know?
Yeah.
I do think it's that local level, interpersonal, not the big behemoths of the parties, but just the people. But what I am really interested in, Flan, is that story of you going to that march. Like, that's such a striking image to me. So Mairead was with you for that?
She was, yeah.
Because that would make it feel even trickier for me. Like, it's one thing to be endangering yourself, but when your loved one is there, how did you feel about that?
I didn't think about it, Bart.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I wanted to go there. It was... our wedding anniversary was the 10th of July. We'll be married 60 years next July, 10th.
Oh, brilliant.
You know? And that great man, Roy Beggs, my great friend, the Protestant friend, himself and his wife got married when? on the very same day.
Really?
But a few years ahead of us.
Okay.
You know? But, you know, I didn't ever fear for her or for me. But that night when Henry Riley said to me,
Don't go.
Flan,
Yeah.
you're putting your life and my life in danger. That made me think all the more. But I mean, he had his point. He knew what was happening in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I suppose I didn't, even though I tried my best at the time. But it takes years to learn and to understand the thinking of the people. Any people, they're different to you.
Yes.
You know.
And you kind of found a middle way, I suppose, that you didn't march, but you did walk into it and shook his hand
Yes.
and then go. I think that has a lot to do with it as well, where you are clever enough socially, where you can diffuse you're like, I'm not going to stick it up someone's nose completely. I'm just going to make my presence feel felt, but also show that I'm peaceful and willing to adhere to their tradition a bit as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the island is as it is. The people in the north have their own beliefs, and their people are there for centuries now at this stage. So they belong to the island of Ireland. We belong to the island of Ireland, and, you know, who was born where and when is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. We are here on this island now. So we must mind this island now. We must do what we can for its people and our beloved Ireland and be friends. There's nothing lost by being a friend, but there's a lot to lose if you have an enemy. An awful lot to lose. And I don't believe in enemies. I haven't for years and years. I did one time, as I said, and I regret it. But thank God I got a chance to make up for it.
And do you remember when it changed for you, that outlook?
It changed for me. I'd say it began to change for me on the night we were received in Newry, that first visit of ours up north. And we found people who were different totally to our beliefs in religion and politics being friendly. That's what changed me. And it got all the more as years went on, when our tours and conferences were on, and crowds of councillors came from Northern Ireland down here, and they loved it down here. I mean, the proof is now that the busload will be full coming from Belfast years after this is all over.
Decades.
Yeah. They're coming just in assignment to the Falls because they love the fun and the crack that goes on there, and that's it. And then other people like me, other people like me now, will welcome them heartily. And I will tell a very funny story about a cousin of mine. My first cousin's daughter, Mary Neeson, who's coming down next week now with her husband. She was born a Catholic, obviously, but she was born when? On the 12th of July. And her daddy, my lovely first cousin Clem, her dad, the late Clem Macaulay, every 12th of July he used to buy her a new dress. And she thought that all this parade stuff, as a youngster, as a kid, she thought all the parades was for her, for her birthday.
Isn't it amazing? As a kid, you could just we used to go to Christmas Mass. I'm born on Christmas Day, and we used to go to Christmas Mass on the 24th. And we weren't particularly religious at all, and my dad would just always go, "That's all for you, son." Bit of hubris, I suppose, but anyway. Yeah, it's funny, as kids, you just go, "Oh, okay." Apparently, that's what it is.
You just see the sounds and the colours and the fuss, and you're like, lovely.
Yeah, that's all from but you say it changed when you visited there, but it must have changed a little previously, I'm assuming, because otherwise you wouldn't have gone up there.
Well, I suppose the fact I had the cousins there was vital.
That softened it.
Was vital.
Yeah.
And another great thing happened, which I regard as a mighty honour. In September 1995, I just came back home on the Monday after Clare won the All-Ireland hurling final. And I came into the pub below Nina, and my late brother, Padder, was there. And I was about to shout, "Come on, Clare," or something like that, when he said to me, "Flan, I've had a phone call from Irene Adair." I mentioned her already, lovely Presbyterian lady who was involved in 2002. Her only son had died. Now, I knew he was dying, but he was a 19-year-old, as fine a specimen of a young man that you ever saw. He had a brain tumour, and it took him. But I got the greatest honour, I'd say, of my life. when we went up there on Tuesday, his father and mother invited me to carry his coffin. I thought it a tremendous honour. And the same year, a few weeks later, a young girl, an only daughter, Siobhan Leahy, died in Ina. She was only 13. And I went on Clare FM radio to say roughly the following. I was at a Presbyterian funeral in Northern Ireland a few weeks ago. I was at this local girl, my past pupil, her funeral just the other day. Will anyone tell me that there's a big difference in the tears of the parents in Northern Ireland or here in Ina? One of them said lost an only son, the other said lost an only daughter. My God, I said, who could say there was any difference in the loss? And, you know, it's such a true story. Such a true story. Heartbreaking, if you like, but that's it. So, you know, you do things, but you're recognised for things too. And that couple often came to Clare. I had serious surgery, remember, in the year 2000 after finishing in school in Ina. And that couple of days came to visit me in St. John's Hospital in Limerick. You know, wonderful people. He never marches now on the 12th of July because he saw from his side that what's the point in this stuff and so on and beating drums and all that, annoying the other side. And he didn't. But that's it.
That's the interesting thing about the 12th. And again, I'm just aware that some people might not be as familiar, but the 12th, it can be quite contentious.
Of course.
You know, it can be like almost, some might say, deliberately inflammatory towards the other side.
Because the marches also go through the opposing areas, don't they?
They do. And it's difficult. It's a difficult issue. But I guess what I want to ask you, Flan, is Ronan O'Snuddy, the musician, has a poem called "When Peace Broke Out in the Garden," which is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, we saw it in Doolin.
Yeah,
it
we
was
saw
beautiful.
him perform it live. So it's this idea basically that there's a garden with all the different plants, and all the different plants are alive, and they all have different attributes, and they're at war, and then certain plants come together to broker a peace. And he talks about how some of the plants thrive in conflict.
Yes.
And don't particularly want it to end. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Flan?
Yeah, I would. And when the Good Friday Agreement happened in Belfast, a wonderful episode in the history of this island, probably one of the greatest ever. And you have to pay tribute to all the people involved, to Bertie Hearn, to Tony Blair, to Trimble, David Trimble,
Hume, yes.
to McGuinness, who's now dead, and to Adams. You know, it took some great courage in them to sign that agreement. But it was the right thing to do. They knew it. They knew it. What was the point of having 30 years of killings? Killing me because I was Catholic, killing you because you were Protestant. You know, good God Almighty, everybody who has a family in particular wants to be able to go to work in peace, to know they're safe going to work, to know that their children have been reared in a peaceful background. That's what life should be about. And if the people in Palestine and Israel could understand that, and instead of killing and bombing and all this terrible stuff that's going on, could they not sit down? In my book, United Nations have failed badly there. They have failed badly. I mean, they've no power. Netanyahu does what he likes. They condemn him for this, they condemn him for that. He doesn't listen, he carries on. But someday, they will sit down and they will make peace. It's like a strike. When a strike happens in Ireland, it doesn't happen too often now. But what happens always? At the end, they broker a deal.
Yeah.
Couldn't they broker it in the beginning? Why strike? You know, there must be give and take in this world. But you have to have compromise if you want peace.
You do, and you can get locked into. You can get almost addicted to the conflict. I think, Flan. I was an experience I really value of my own is living in China for 3 years. So I got to live in a communist country. So what that meant was that I got to study alongside people from Cuba and Russia, you know, and Belarus and places you might not have so much access to as, you know, in Europe or the West as it's known. And I remember being, because we were all international students studying there, I remember an Israeli student of Chinese medicine found this amazing tea house, and he wanted to bring us all out because he had this encyclopedic knowledge of all these different teas, Chinese white tea and Qing cha, Lu cha, Hong cha, you know, Hei cha, all these different like types of teas. And he brought us all down. We were all there from different countries and just like sipping and trying, and he'd ask us what we liked, and he was wonderful, you know. And we were just talking about because some people were finishing up their study and like, oh, I'd like to go visit you. Yeah, come visit me, and you know, come visit me in Japan, come visit me in, you know, Nigeria, whatever it is. And he said to one lady, he was like, I don't think you're going to be able to come visit me. And she was like, yes, I don't think you're going to be able to come visit me either. And God love him, there was an American with us. He's like, why? And I'd explained that this gentleman is Israeli and this lady is Malaysian, and Malaysia is a predominantly Muslim country. Yeah. And that there's no travel between them. If they show their passport at the border, they're turned away. And it just seemed so silly that we could sit down together and have tea together and have just the best time. But because of some coincidence, some vagrancy of fate that meant that one of them was born in a certain country, they're prohibited from even reaching out the hand, you know.
And that's the bigger problem then, isn't it? Because that softening, that beautiful softening you described, Flan, with the funeral, carrying the coffin, with going to the march, that is the thing that is needed, I suppose, in a hotbed of conflict like in the Middle East. Now, if there is no chance of people sitting down because the powers that be, I do think that goes for, like, we can have the endless discussions about all the different horrible things that are done by sides and who does the worst and all that. But there are definitely on both sides of that conflict interest in keeping that conflict going. And if that, and they keep people from talking. And that's why I get so upset when in our Western societies there are people say you cannot talk to that person, you cannot platform that person. Like, yes, always talk to people. Talk to people who have the most abhorrent ideas. There's this beautiful story of a black blues guitar player who has converted hundreds of members of the KKK, of the Ku Klux Klan, just by sitting down with them and listening to them. And you would go like, why would you listen to them? They have nothing to say. But he noticed that if he listened to them first and then talked to them, a lot of them just wanted to be friends. Sure. But if you're preaching to people, that will not go over well, especially in the first instance.
No.
I find these stories very moving, Flan. It's very beautiful, and it's also that thing of things may seem impossible. Like if you look at Gaza now, you're like, how's that ever going to get better? But I'm sure it looked like that here. I'm sure it looked impossible.
Yeah, it did. And you know, another thing, around here is a beautiful place. It's a quiet rural area. The best people I ever knew were the people I knew when I was young around here. They were all farmers, small farmers. They worked hard from dawn till dark, every day of the life. They had gardens, self-sufficient gardens. They had the pig that was fed up and killed once a year and so on for Christmas. They went to the bough for turf. They cut the hay, but they worked hard, and they had nothing. They really had nothing. But one thing they had was they had great heart. And you know, your neighbours are even more important to you than your siblings in this way. I was called from school one day, 11th of November, 1974. Our childminder came up to the school and she rushed in the door and says, Flan, come down quick. Granddad's dead. That was my father. And he was dead in the field behind the house. But who was there to help me that day? My neighbours. I went over the road to Davins, and Sean Keating was there and a few more, and they came over. My brothers and sisters were in Limerick, they were in Dublin, they were different places. And it's a great lesson. It's a great lesson. You live with people, you're among them every day. They're your neighbours. If they're in trouble, you'll help them. If you're in trouble, they'll help you. And that's really the meaning of life to me. Be nice to people, and they'll be nice to you. If you want to pick a fight with a neighbour, you'll get a fight.
It's very easy, isn't it, Flan?
and your own house will be in disharmony.
Absolutely.
Because it's just bordering on, like, I heard someone tell a story recently of having a big fight with their neighbour, and I'm just like, that's the worst situation you can be in. A funny thing with that, though, is like, we have a lot of power outages. When we were in Doolin, it was a lot more. In Kildenboy now, it's a bit less. But when you report a power outage to the ESP, you have to give your neighbour's phone number.
Yeah.
And I always thought that's so interesting, because back in the Netherlands, where I'm from, like, that would never be the case. It's just like, it's singular. It's your own little unit.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I love that it's still just embedded in the whole fabric. That, like, obviously you know your neighbour's phone number and give it.
I remember my father has a story that he grew up in North Kerry, and the farm next to theirs, the father passed away and left a 13-year-old son. So the 13-year-old then became the man of the house, and it was a farm to run at that age, very difficult.
Yeah.
So apparently my grandfather kind of took him under his wing and stuff, and myself and my father really, I just tagged along, interviewed the people around the farms around where he grew up, and there was a lot of death, Flan. Like, people passed away, whether through illness or accidents or it was no joke back then. The mortality rate was very, very high. So that by, like, your neighbours could save your life. There's a story of my grandfather donating a cow to a family that lost theirs that probably got them through the winter. But so my granddad took this young fellow under his wing and showed him how to run the farm and stuff. Apparently they were very good friends. But they have a story about how they were out in the bog cutting turf, and they cut their turf, and the local sergeant was driving by, and he was like, "Oh, would you go in a bit deeper and cut my turf as well, and I'll give you a few shillings." They were like, "Okay, grand." So they went in, cut the sergeant's turf, brought it to the edge of the road, then went to the pub for a few drinks.
Yeah.
And as they were driving home, they were stopped by the same sergeant, and he wrote them up for a ticket.
Oh, Jesus.
So the next night, they're back in the pub, and they tell everyone in the pub what happened. You're like, "Oh, we cut the turf for this fella," and then he called us and gave us a ticket. And the whole pub got up, went with them back to the bog, and dragged all the turf back into the bog.
Lovely.
But, like, you need that, Flan. You need to know your neighbours and be able to rely on them, ask them for stuff, give them stuff when they need it.
Yeah.
100%.
I mentioned earlier on that when we were young, everyone had a pig. We had a pig here next door, and the pig was killed. It was a lovely custom, the nicest custom I ever remember in rural Ireland. That was, when the pig was killed, there were puddings and pork steak, and they were divided. You brought some to the local neighbours as well, and they did the same in turn. And it was a lovely custom. What I loved about it was, when we went to the neighbours, you'd get a glass of orange maybe, or a few biscuits, so you might get a shilling, but one thing getting half a crown. Jesus, half a crown back in 1950s was unbelievable. It was worth about €50 an hour. I don't know. But it was a lovely custom. But they've stopped it. EU laws have brought in that you can't kill a pig at home, so bring them off to some abattoir somewhere. Takes from the country living.
It does. And that's again the problem with local things actually working well, and then higher up things interfering with that. We have a need for these higher institutions, but they also should leave local people alone a bit more, maybe. I think.
Yeah, they should. But that's life. That's it. You make the best of whatever you have, and you 100%. Enjoy it, which I do.
Yeah. Do you have any final words, Flan? Just any final thoughts, any words for anyone around the... Actually, you know what, I'm going to... Specifically, Flan, I would say, do you have any words for anyone who might be thinking of reaching out to a quote-unquote enemy?
Don't waste a minute. Go and do it. You have nothing to lose. At worst, They won't shake your hand, but at least you'll be happy you made the effort. You must make the effort, because if everybody's stuck up, and because he's my enemy, I won't talk to him, I won't salute him, that goes on and goes on for life. And that is terrible. I would hate to face my God, having been as I was, as a young Republican man. And I can face my God in confidence now. I think he'll say, you weren't too bad. You made an effort.
Brilliant. I have nothing to add. Amazing.
Thank you so much,
Right,
Flan.
lads.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that. Thanks very much.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.